Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so glad you're here today because honestly, we're going on a pretty wild ride. We are going to connect the massive macro-level world of international trade wars and continental geopolitics all the way down to the micro level, specifically to the artificial intelligence running right on a single smartphone. It's just a fascinating look at how global problems are forcing highly localized, high-tech innovations. So settle in because this is going to be a brilliant journey.
Okay, let's dive into this. 3.46 million, just let that massive number sink in for a second. We're talking about 3.46 million tons of municipal solid waste, or MSW, that is exported and shipped across the U.S. border to Michigan landfills from Ontario, Canada, literally every single year. I mean, to put that into perspective, that's enough trash to fill the Empire State Building multiple times over, annually. It's this quiet daily reality of transborder logistics. But you have to wonder, what actually happens when that established flow of disposals suddenly collides with international tariffs and a wildly changing political landscape?
So here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're taking a zoom-in, zoom-out approach. We'll start with the US-Canada trade war, then look at Ontario's looming waste crisis. Next, we'll introduce 905 Wood and their sentient bridge, walk through their AI digital refinery workflow, and finally, wrap up with securing the circular bioeconomy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The US-Canada trade war, a geopolitical squeeze. To really grasp this waste issue, we've got to rewind to the 2026 mandatory review deadline for the Trilateral Trade Agreement, known down south as USMCA and up north as CUSMA. Things escalated incredibly fast here. On July 1, 2026, the US actually declined to extend the pact, which triggered a very lengthy 10-year review process. Then, right around mid-July, drifting wildfire smoke from Canada severely impacted U.S. air quality. In response, President Donald Trump threatened new tariffs to cover those environmental costs, which immediately prompted Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to threaten retaliatory measures of their own. Fast forward to July 20th, and Washington officially imposed a 50% tariff on a broad range of Canadian goods. So we're basically looking at a classic, rapid escalation of year-to-date headline news trends and serious trade tensions between Washington and Ottawa.
So the crucial point here is understanding the specific U.S. grievances that actually stalled this agreement in the first place. Washington cited three main issues. First, a Canadian bilateral deal that allowed Chinese electric vehicles into the market at heavily reduced tariffs. Second, they pointed out discrepancies in enforcing import bans on goods produced with forced labor, basically arguing Canada was being used as a backdoor. And third, there were massive surges in Canadian dairy and protein isolate exports that the U.S. felt totally bypassed supply management quotas. These core structural disagreements are really the foundation of the current border friction we're seeing.
Section 2. Ontario's looming waste crisis, the border choke point.
Now, what's really interesting here is that we are zooming in from the macroeconomic trade war to the very physical, on-the-ground reality of the border. Because, it's not just cars and dairy moving across that boundary. It is millions of tons of municipal solid waste shipped across the border to U.S. Michigan landfills from Ontario, Canada. And the sheer dependency this creates is wild. Just over 14%, 14.35% to be exact, of all waste disposed of in Michigan landfills originates from Ontario. Michigan actually relies on this import for landfill revenue, and Ontario desperately relies on Michigan for disposal capacity. But the moment trade wars erupt, this vital, completely unglamorous supply chain suddenly becomes incredibly vulnerable. Let's break down the stark realities side by side. Historically, Michigan has charged a super low tipping fee of just 36 cents per ton, although a hike to $5 has been proposed. Meanwhile, Ontario's domestic disposal costs are roughly double that. Because of this massive cost difference, Ontario exports a staggering 27% of its total waste. Now here's the really critical data point. At current export rates, Ontario's domestic landfills will be totally exhausted by 2037. But if this trade war leads to a closed border or prohibitive tariffs on waste, that exhaustion date violently accelerates to 2034. Ontario absolutely has to find a way to manage its waste domestically and do it efficiently.
Section 3. 905 Wood, the sentient bridge.
Now, while all this macro geopolitical chaos is swirling at the border, there's some incredible innovation happening right at the ground level in Ontario to divert waste from those landfills and actually turn it into a resource. A company called 905 Wood has created a framework they call the sentient bridge, and I just love this metaphor.
Basically, they operate a specialized dumpster service that doesn't just collect trash, it filters it. Think of it as a VIP bouncer, but literally for plywood. They target new residential builds, pulling framing offcuts and plywood remnants, which are usually 85 to 95% clean anyway, and they digitally and physically segregate them so they never, ever mix with treated, painted, or contaminated wood. They're essentially bridging the gap between a highly chaotic construction site and the extremely strict high purity requirements of the biocarbon market.
905 Wood has the saying, "Wood only isn't a limitation, it's the moat." And that pretty much hits the nail on the head. By flat-out refusing to haul mixed garbage and specializing exclusively in clean wood, they completely sidestep the massive regulatory headaches and tariff vulnerabilities associated with mixed municipal solid waste. Their extreme specialization is literally their strategic advantage in a highly volatile environment.
Section 4, AI Digital Refinery Workflow, the microview.
So you might be wondering, how exactly does a dumpster company achieve this insane level of purity and navigate all these complex international trade rules? Well, the answer is edge artificial intelligence. They aren't relying on massive remote server farms to crunch their data. The entire 905 Wood digital refinery workflow is powered right at the edge. They are literally using the Google Pixel 10 Pro running Android 16, fully utilizing the LiteRT AI stack features. This means all the complex visual verification and data processing happens locally, right on the device, in real time, whether they're on a muddy construction site or at a sorting facility. Let's move to how this builds step by step, because it's a beautifully seamless operation. Step 1 is the initial request for quote, or RFQ, and intake. Then in Step 2, the magic really happens. The LiteRT AI visually verifies that the load is in fact clean, untreated wood. Step 3 acts as a digital compliance gate, ensuring the load passes all necessary regulatory checks for verification and compliance. Finally, Step 4 generates a precise certificate of origin. Through the digital refinery application workflow UI/UX output PDF documentation features, they've literally turned a physical pile of wood scraps into highly structured, actionable, and compliant data.
Just think about this incredible before and after. You start with traditional, chaotic construction waste. It's unverified, completely mixed up, and highly vulnerable to border friction and sudden tariffs. But then run it through the digital refinery workflow, and that exact same material becomes AI-verified, origin-certified biocarbon feedstock. Because the output PDF documentation proves exactly what the material is and where it originated, it effectively shields this specific supply chain from all the USMCA trade war fallout. It proves without a doubt that it's a compliant commodity, not just unverified garbage crossing a border.
Section 5, Securing the Circular Bioeconomy. Zooming back out.
We've seen the tech up close, but what is the larger impact of diverting this specific waste stream away from those rapidly filling Michigan and Ontario landfills? Well, this brilliantly illustrates why hyperlocal tech matters so much on a macro scale. First off, it actively helps mitigate Ontario's 2026 municipal, industrial, commercial, and institutional exit, which is slated to leave 4 million tons of waste totally orphaned. Second, it perfectly prepares the market for the impending 2029 RE wood ban, which will legally prohibit clean wood from entering landfills entirely. By operationalizing the Google Pixel 10 Pro and LiteRT AI stack to create pure feedstock, 905 Wood effectively secures Ontario's industrial leadership in the emerging global circular bioeconomy. They are taking a severe trade and waste crisis and turning it into a powerful economic engine.
So, we've seen how a political dispute in Washington and Ottawa can literally threaten to choke the landfills of the Midwest, and how a smartphone running AI in Ontario can build a digital bridge right over all that chaos, which leaves us with this final provocative question. In an era of sudden tariffs and tightening borders, how will edge AI and digital refineries ultimately redefine the future of global supply chains? Really think about that. It's a localized solution with profoundly global implications. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible systems that run our world. Catch you next time.